All right, welcome to Indie Worldwide. I'm your host, Anthony. Today we have with us Michaela Greiler, host of the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. Welcome, Michaela. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah. It was a
So we
beautiful
had
day
all kinds of
today.
technical difficulties getting started, but Michaela was nice enough to lend her own podcast recording infrastructure. To get us started, I was hoping you could fill in the listeners on your own backstory and what it is you're working on now.
Well, the backstory, what is the backstory, right? The backstory to starting my own business, probably, right? Well, I started my business. So I didn't start, I'm a very slow starter, right? And this is very
Mhm.
important to me that I'm not, getting myself into something I cannot handle. I was very afraid for years to be an entrepreneur. Actually, in at university, I was part of a startup. So this was during my bachelor's, and it was like a dev shop that we started, or the two of
Mm.
us, and. And yeah, I was actually quite happy that I left actually at one point. And I was quite happy because for me at that point, it was really hard to handle this. Oh, at one point, you have like all the clients. And this was
Mhm.
typically when there was also exam time at university, right? So there was the perfect timing that you really don't have any time. And then all the clients want something from you, and there would be money coming in, and so we were really making all nighters and eating really badly and things like this. And then when I had quite some time, let's say during a summer, there weren't a
Mhm.
lot of clients, right? So it was not a very
Mhm.
stable position. Obviously, it's we just started this, and so after a while was really happy to leave that. And so the other person that started this as well took it over and still runs it, and it's very successful now. But I was
Mhm.
actually very happy at that point to leave, because I felt like this is not stable enough, and I cannot handle with that one. And I was very focused on research. I wanted to become a researcher, and especially in industry. And so this is the path that I took at that point. And so I did it for several years. I was actually working at Microsoft Research, and then at Microsoft Corp. And I was a little bit like, this is my dream job for a short amount
Mhm.
of time. So I was several years there. But at one point, I felt like, okay, this is too restrictive. And also, um, if you give me something that I'm very passionate about to work on it, it's really easy for me. It never So most of the time in my life, I never felt like I'm working. It felt like I'm playing, or I'm doing something that I
Mhm.
would do anyway, because I enjoy it so much. But at this organization at Microsoft, for example, there's also a lot of that you cannot influence, right? So I got actually a new job, or a new boss, sorry, a new
Mhm.
manager, and that person had a complete different mindset, and they didn't really value research anymore so much, right? And maybe it was the right step. I don't say it's not, it wasn't. Maybe it was the right step, because the product that we developed, right? So I'm really
Mhm.
I was always on teams that were driving innovation and research, right? And so we were making prototypes, and building and driving this into innovation. And then our team was very successful, so the things that we developed were taking up by all teams at Microsoft. So all product teams were taking the tools that we were providing, or the methods that we were developing. And so I think maybe it was a natural step for our team that we became actually a real product team. Do you know what I mean? So it was
Mhm.
prototyping, it was research, it was working with teams, figuring out, where is the innovation, how can we make engineering better for them, um, and that. And then at one point, it was so stable that our prototypes were more and more becoming, products, right? Real products. There was not so much innovation maybe going on anymore. I don't think you have actually
Mhm.
to do that, right? So, and the previous manager, he always managed to, we productized something, but based on this product, we could find a new innovation and do something new. And so the new manager came in, and I think there was a different mindset. This was really about, we make this now stable and that's it, right? And so there wasn't really much room for innovation anymore, which I think is, it was not that our whole team was made out of researchers, right? But there was like one part
Mhm.
of us, and we always drove the innovation on that. And so this became a little bit less important. And so I think at that point for me, it was clear that I have to leave, because I didn't want to, be in a product team that just develops the product. I wanted to drive innovation and things like this. And so At that point, I decided what should I do, right? And I
Hmm.
also moved into sort of the middle of nowhere. I call it that, and everybody that lives here will say I'm mad that I say that, but uh, if you lived in Seattle before, and I actually traveled the whole world, and I lived in many different countries and different continents. And so for me, it
Hmm.
was really like, okay, I'm now going back to nowhere, like the little city, and there isn't a lot of large there aren't a lot of companies around here where I thought that I could work.
Hmm.
And in general, I felt like maybe I should start my own business, right? And so this is how the whole thing came about. I actually worked for Microsoft a little bit from Munich, and I worked for Microsoft even in Austria a little bit. But I was
Hmm.
already transitioning into my own business, and so I did it really step by step. I started working with clients outside, testing a little bit the waters. And when I had that, I felt, well, there's enough demand, right, for what I'm offering. Then I actually took the leap and I quit my full time job. That was almost a year ago. It's not completely a year ago. Yeah.
What was the point where you felt confident to take that leap and to quit?
Um, Never. I'm still not feeling very confident that I so it was more or less there wasn't one thing why I decided this is the right thing, but there were like a
Hmm.
lot of factors that were in that. So they wanted me to go back to Seattle from Microsoft, right? And
Hmm.
I didn't want to go. I have my family here. I didn't want to move them, and I had some clients, and I saw that actually, well I can provide a little bit from my salary, or I can subsidize a little bit of my salary from that what I'm building here. And
Hmm.
so I didn't feel that it's the right thing to do. I just did it, right? I was thinking about it so long, and also pushing it away for a really long time, that at the point I was like just saying, okay, I have to do it now. But it was not like, oh, I know now this is going to be so
Yeah.
successful, or so it was more like, I'm so tired now of not being able to decide what to do, and this is what I'm doing now. And so I just quit, and then the pandemic started actually. So very
Yep.
closely after that. So yeah, you never know,
So
right?
the first clients you had, which business were they for? The code reviews?
Yeah. So I'm doing consultancy and training in code reviews.
Hmm.
And so this was a larger organization actually, and I worked with them on their code reviews. I did some trainings for them. At that point, it was still on site, right? So I flew out to them and I gave some on site trainings, and I really, really enjoyed it. And this was actually before I quit, right? So I did that
Hmm.
already while being at Microsoft, which is really nice if you're a European employee for Microsoft, then you can do like side hustles, right? So you have to get it in
Mm.
writing. So my manager was aware of it. I don't know if
Hmm.
this would have been possible in America or in the US when I was still at Microsoft there, but in Germany, the policies was that if you let your manager know and they're fine with it, then you can do it, right? And so I did that, and it felt really good, and I felt like, well, I can see myself doing this, and I did some other consultancy work for others, and so this was the first thing that I did there. I had quite a few other projects that people asked me to do that I declined, because at that point I didn't want to spread myself too thin, right? So I wanted really to focus on something and a little bit productize what I'm doing, so that I'm
Hmm.
not, I'm analyzing some data over here, I'm building some projects over there, but that I have one clear direction. So this was something that was important to me. So when the right client came along, more or less, right? So I was
Hmm.
waiting for the right client that fit into what I want to offer and what I think that I can really provide value. I think this was very important for me, that I felt like, well, okay, there are people that are interested in what I'm offering here.
How did you get those very first clients?
They were actually through Microsoft. So it was really nice, right? So I had a network there, and
Mm.
the people that I worked with, right? So actually my manager
Hmm.
at Microsoft, they were referring me because they knew that I did that for Microsoft, but Microsoft doesn't have the capacity to do that for outside clients, right? And so this was
Mhm.
actually how I was introduced there, and they were just referring me, which was also very nice. Yeah. So I'm very thankful for the first client.
And then did you find a way to productize your service in a way that was scalable for you?
Yeah, I think so. Because um, I'm giving those workshops, right? But a part of those workshops are really the same for everybody. I'm customizing
Hmm.
them and I'm tailoring them to the organization. But I have a lot of content now and a lot of different lessons that I can give, and so it's always more than one workshop. So whatever the client need, I can plug and play different aspects that they would that's important for them, and then I change parts of the things so that it's even more fitting if I'm doing company trainings, right? Another thing that I
Hmm.
also offered, and this came about with the pandemic, because suddenly on sites weren't really something that I can do anymore, or that is possible.
Hmm.
So I started offering just seats on a workshop. So I'm saying, for example, on this date, I'm making a workshop, and it doesn't matter if your whole company or your whole team wants to participate, but you can buy one ticket, one seat for that. Um, in there, it's very much the same content. I mean, to be honest, it's not. Everyone is a little bit different, because I'm working. It depends
Hmm.
on how many people do I have, and I ask them also for the background. Um, but it's sort of, I mean, I have all my content already ready, and yeah, I give those workshops. So I think in one part I managed to make a product of it. I definitely think that's true. What I'm a little bit less happy with it is that it's not like it's not a stable income, which,
Hmm.
as I said at the beginning, is actually something that's, I think, for my mental well-being would be really good, because yeah, it feels like, well, there might be a lot of people asking for something right now, and then there's like 2 months where there are only a few requests or something. And so having something more, yeah, being able to calculate with it a little bit more, I think that would be really nice. Yeah.
How are you finding your clients on an ongoing basis? Is it referrals, or do you have an outbound process?
Yeah, this is something that I have to actually learn. And so I just started, was meeting with another founder yesterday, and we are starting a mastermind actually, about that,
Mm.
because I'm completely green when it comes to sales, or,
Hmm.
or things like this. So right now, every client is sort of a present for me. They just find me. And, it's either, as I said, the first one was through my manager at Microsoft that actually referred them to me, and so people are hearing about it somewhere. Maybe they're reading some of my papers, so I published, right? I think it's a lot of, they stumble across something that I did, right? So when I was at Microsoft, and when I was doing my PhD, I wrote papers, obviously. And so if they are reading my papers, and the papers are actually read quite often about code reviews, they might find me, or search for me, and then they find out that I'm doing code review workshops. Or maybe other means. Maybe I'm on a podcast. For example, I was on SE Radio, and that's actually driving quite a bit. Um,
Awesome.
and then I'm blogging, right? So this is what
Mm.
I know how to do, right? So this is it comes more easy, I think. uh, I actually really think there's a lot of potential if I would have the right skill set to go and do sales, direct sales. I was
Hmm.
planning this year, so my business is in the first year, right? And so I was actually planning that I will be on conferences quite a bit, and I think on conferences I'm in my comfort zone again. So I could talk with people, and we could have like really technical discussions, and you know,
Hmm.
and so I think then naturally this would lead one to the other, right? Because if people have the problem and they talk with me, I think I can very easily demonstrate the value. um, but I have no idea how to pick up a phone and call somebody, or maybe
Right.
I just don't want to do it. This is a combination of things, right? So I feel very overwhelmed with this idea of doing direct sales somehow, but I think it's really important. And because I'm not, there are a lot of workshop providers that go over some networks, right? And this is
Hmm.
something that I'm thinking of sometimes, maybe should I do that, but I really value my independence right now. And they do that for you, right? So they are really trained, and they know how to do that and how to approach other people, and they also know whom to ask. if they want to have like those trainings. And so that could be beneficial for me, but maybe I'm in this mastermind, maybe I'm able to, grow and learn a little
Mhm.
bit about sales. So this is on my to-do list for 2021 to to learn that and to know how to do that. Right now people just find me over the internet, I think. They hear or somebody tells them about me. Yeah.
I would think your podcast is probably like a decent source of inbound lead
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
true. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, the podcast. So the writing the podcast, and yeah, and sometimes if I do, for example, I'm going to be giving a talk for ACM, and I think that's also
Hmm.
something that I think might be really important, because it's like software engineering radio, right? It has the right audience and the people that are at ACM, right, that are interested in ACM,
Mm.
and so scientific papers and scientific outcomes. I think this is actually my target audience. So these are the decision makers that say yes or no to improving their software engineering practices. I think I thought about this actually quite a bit. I think that, for example, in my workshops, there are a lot of developers, but seldomly those developers are also the decision makers to, for example, make a whole workshop for their company, right? So there would be a different,
Hmm.
sometimes it's a department that is responsible for training of the engineers. So you would have to actually, address them, or sometimes it's maybe the CTO, or it's some engineering manager or something. They are called like distinguished engineers, or software engineering leaders. Every company has a different
Hmm.
name for them, but especially if you're looking at larger corporations, they have like a whole department that are just engineers that are their responsibility is to make the engineering practices of the other engineers better, right? Or make, work on them. And so I think those are hanging out a little bit in those areas. So I actually think that this ACM talk could bring some business. Yeah. So there's definitely, I have
How?
some strategic
Mm.
thing behind it, but I'm just thinking that direct sales, I mean, and conferences where you have direct access to people, I think this would be the best. That's my gut feeling. If
How
you could do
large
that,
is the consulting business now?
large in terms of revenue, or what? How do you mean?
In
Like how
terms
large?
of revenue or clients?
Um, so I can say so much that I exceeded my salary at Microsoft that I had before, and so I'm quite happy with that one. I don't. I still have. I still have some capacity. I think that I could even take on
Hmm.
more clients, or do, yeah. But from how much I do, I'm also building a house this year. I have two little kids. I'm actually quite happy with how it's going, right? So for me, especially when I reached the amount that I would get at my previous job, right? It was something like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm really done, striving for more right now.
Right.
Maybe what would be more important for me is to make that more stable, right? Because even though it's going quite well, especially if you think it's the
Hmm.
first year and it's a pandemic and I'm giving workshops, right? Which is, I mean, maybe it's in March I was thinking like, oh my goodness, what an idea, right? On-site workshops during a global pandemic. um but yeah, what would make myself a little bit more calm is if I could transition into something like a SaaS business, or monthly,
Hmm.
where you just have a monthly recurring revenue where you can calculate with the money a little bit better. Because now it's like it's a spiky thing, right? So it could be like that I'm really not earning a lot for 2 months, and then I have quite some nice revenue, and then again it's like dry, and then I'm getting a lot of revenue, right? So yeah, so this is also why I started building this code review analytics tool. I mean, it's part of
Hmm.
the reasons, but so I hope that maybe this will bring some more stability into the whole thing. Yeah.
That's really an amazing milestone to hit, to match your previous salary but on your own terms.
Yeah, that
Like
was
that's
really
the goal
cool.
for most of us. What is this? What is the code review tool that you're building now? And is it already launched or is it under development?
So the tool, this tool, I wanted to build this tool since forever, right? And so there wasn't really a lot of market research, or is there a market or something like that behind. And the
Hmm.
reason was that whenever I'm consulting with organizations, I would need this tool myself. And so this was reason enough for me to build it. And so I thought, well, when I have a new consultancy gig, right, and I'm helping people to improve their code reviews, because I'm not only giving these workshops, right, for the engineers, but I'm
Hmm.
also working with organizations to, on a on different terms to help them really improve their code review processes and tools and things like this. And one thing that I had at Microsoft, right, it was so important, is that we always had the data, right? So
Mm.
I was improving software engineering processes always in a data driven way. So this means that I had all the commit messages at my fingertips, right? I could run analysis, I could run correlations. Is this somehow influencing the other, right? If we're
Hmm.
changing something here, do we decrease code quality? But not only by just asking people, is this true or what do you think, which is a perception and doesn't reflect really reality, but also by having a second view, and this view is a data view. And so I was missing this quite a bit. And this is why I'm building, it's a code review analytics tool. And so it extracts your data and it gives me exactly the data and the view that I actually need to know on your data. And I think this is really, really powerful for my consultancy. And so it's in this state right now. I can already run it. I built it actually in such a ship it October challenge way where I was actually streaming it. So it was a little bit like a playing around thing. But um, yeah, so right now I can use it. I can use it, right? So, and I'm actually working
Hmm.
with two early adopters, but it's not a standalone tool, right? So it's not something that right now users can log in and look at the data. These steps, I left them out because I don't think it's important right now. So right now I use this tool, and um, the early adopters have a view to it, so they see the data and they see the analysis and they get feedback, and I'm improving it based on their feedback. But yeah, maybe also in 2021, I think probably is the right time that I would like to have it a little bit more standalone, right? So I have to
Hmm.
see how much of this tool is actually useful without me being there as well. From
Mm.
the discussions with the early adopter, I get the feeling that it is. So yeah, so I think it will get there, but it will be somewhere in 21. That's the plan.
So is this like something that interfaces with Git and like pulls in all of the commit messages, or are there other data sources as well
Um,
that it's pulling
yeah,
in?
right now it's only on GitHub actually. So
Hmm.
I would like to enhance it for other code review tools, so GitLab, for example, or Bitbucket. But right now it's just for Git. I don't think I'm also very, as I said, try to grow really slowly,
Hmm.
and so that I don't, I think it's really important to always ask, where's the value here. And I think it's better to provide a lot of value for one segment of your, yeah, clientele or customers than
Hmm.
cover all of them. Like I could now implement it for everybody, but then I would have to be less careful about the features that I'm developing, because there's only so many hours that you have in your day, right? And so right now I try to really focus on people that are using GitHub and provide them with the information that they need. And
Hmm.
obviously, if I would get in a client that now uses something else, and it would make sense for me to adapt the tool for them, I think I could do that, because it's built in a way that I can just change out the data sources, yeah, where I'm getting the data from, and then the tool will sort of render it the same way.
So speaking of hours in a day, how is your time currently balanced between the podcast, your consulting, this new tool, building your house?
Oof, the kids. um, yeah, there's, as I said at the beginning, I think there are a lot of things that I have to still grow as a founder in the
Hmm.
balancing my work, and being even better in prioritizing. I think is something that I could improve. Right now a lot of things are done because I really like them. you know I
Hmm.
said, if I have a lot of passion for it, it doesn't feel like work, right? And so this can also be a trap a little bit. I do a lot of things that are, maybe I didn't have, like for the podcast, I never had a concrete goal of this is going to be, my business or something. It's
Hmm.
something that I wanted to do and that I'm really, really enjoying. So I'm keep doing it. And now actually it's just the point. So I'm doing it now over a year, and now is the point where I feel like, okay, maybe it should at least pay its own bills and something like this, right? So if I can turn it, because I really like it, can turn it into a business, this is something that I'm also start to tinker around with the idea right now. But before that, I really did it just because I wanted to do it, and because I thought, yeah, it's important to me. And then my consultancy business and the workshops, yeah, I think I really don't have a lot of time left. If you think I'm doing the podcast as well, and I have my kids at home, and 2020 was a year that I had my kids more at home than normally, right? So my little one was
Mm-hmm.
always too small for kindergarten, so I had her with me anyway. But also my older one was at home with me during the lockdown, so he wasn't able to go to kindergarten. So it's quite a challenge for the family to balance all of that. What I realized is that my business grows often despite me having being able to work on it, which
Mm-hmm.
is a very interesting perspective, right? So, for example, I took the whole July off because it was just too much. So I had a lot of clients, a lot of workshops in June and in May. And so I felt in July that my house project, was because of the lockdown, it didn't start at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And so then everything started very much as the story that I had during my bachelor's. Everything started exactly then when the house was starting as well, right? So I had all these clients coming in, I had a workshop at the consultancy. And exactly at that point, they also started my house, and so I felt like I don't have enough time to be attentive for that. I have both kids at home, and so I did. May and June was really crazy, and then I took the whole July off, so I wasn't working on my business.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that I didn't work on my business, and obviously you're still thinking about it, but you're thinking about it on a less operational level, right? So you're thinking less about it. Oh, I have to answer this email, and oh, I have to schedule here, and follow up there, and write this blog
Mm-hmm.
post, but more in a grand vision scheme. And so I actually think it was very helpful this months of July for my business. And I did the same before the pandemic. So we are normally this year, unfortunately not, but normally we are always traveling during winter time, right? So we are, for example, on Canary Island, which I really like that I'm not in the cold. And so last year in part of January and February, I was actually also taking off. So I was really working only little on my business. And it was such a wonderful time. And it was a very deliberate time at that point, right? I was thinking, well, this is now real time to recharge and think about the business in a very different way. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I worked a lot on my business again. And I feel like I'm overdone with it. So I'm also planning, for example, on December to really slow down, all the activities that I normally do, because you can take on so much, and you can do,
Mm-hmm.
the podcast. The podcast will still be released because I already recorded some of the things, but I really try to focus not to do any extra curriculum
Mm-hmm.
activities, right? Where you say, well, you're doing too much. And so in general, this was a really long answer to your question, but um, maybe the most important one is that, well, I'm not working 40 hours per week. It's just impossible for me to do that. I don't have so much because half of the day, my kids, even if they're in kindergarten, they are here. Um, but it works, which is good. I think I was myself was a little bit surprised because there's always this um, you have to work 80 hours to be successful, and people have very different dreams. The founder that I met yesterday, she was like, oh, go big or go home, and this is definitely not my mentality. It's so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm really happy where I am right now, and that I matched my salary without putting in so many hours as I would have at Microsoft, right? So this is actually my dream. Yeah.
Go big or go home is a very funny phrase right now when we're all working home from home
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly, right? Yeah.
You're already at home. Go big from home from the sofa.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
How did your mindset shift around your business when you took that break? What were some of the like decisions you made, or how did you decide to expand?
I think the most important one was that I saw that nothing bad happened, right? I didn't write a blog post, and I didn't, I wasn't on Twitter. I'm generally, I'm
Hmm.
not a lot of on Twitter, just because I don't have the time to do it. I always, sometimes I feel bad about this, right? And so exactly when I start feeling bad about those things, and as I, for example, felt this week, I felt like, oh, I'm not on Twitter as all the others. They are so active on Twitter and they have so many
Mm.
followers, blah, blah. And exactly those moments, I think, are for me the moments where I say, well, actually go a step back, because you're starting to work, or you're starting to think not yourself, right? It's something that others are
Hmm.
triggering, or even the platforms is triggering, that you think you should be on Twitter all the time because it seems that everybody is tweeting and saying something genius all the time, right?
Hmm.
Which I think it's not true. It's the platforms are designed in a way that you're starting to think that. um, and I actually believe that being on Twitter and saying, things all the time is not the right way to grow my business. So there are definitely think better ways, and this means that go a step back and think again. What are some strategic moves that you can make that bring you much further than spending all your time trying to find tweets that people like, or blog posts, or you can spend your whole day grinding, syndicating content, creating content, replying to people, uh, but at the end of the day, I really I really believe that it's not the right way for everybody. I mean, there are definitely people that
Hmm.
they build their own business on that, but I don't. For myself, it doesn't make me happy. It makes me quite unhappy. And then I think I have to distance myself and think, well, this is actually not my dream, right? I want to do it in a different way. And then I step back, and I'm not on Twitter at all, not writing any blog posts. I'm getting out of all this pressure that actually is applied from what we have to do to be successful. And suddenly I see, well, I'm successful despite not doing all the
Mm.
things that people tell you. And I think this is really important. Yeah, if that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the successful people we see on Twitter aren't necessarily representative of the pool of successful people in general, however you're defining success. So, of course, you're going to see some successful people on Twitter because that was part of their success, possibly. But you don't know how many people did just fine without it. And I think as part of like doing these interviews, I'm finding more and more people who have found success through other channels. They're not Twitter famous or famous at all, but they've made amazing businesses through completely different distribution channels. I think you're right, where like the platform itself sucks you in, and there's a lot of FOMO around things like Twitter, but it's not necessarily the best use of your time, and it's a huge time suck for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I started out, and I was actually a lot on indie hackers and all these sources where people tell you how to do it, and I was obviously influenced by that, and I'm still influenced by that, and I think I got a lot of good information out of it. But one of the informations was like I needed to be everywhere, right? So I started actually
Hmm.
creating an Instagram account and a Twitter account and whatnot. And very quickly, I think I realized this is not for me. Right, it makes me absolutely unhappy to post pictures on Instagram. So I completely shut down all my. I tried it several times, like if I could do it, and um,
Hmm.
I think it's a very important channel, and probably I will use it, but I will use it at a time that I have a person that loves to do that, right? And that they have a strategic way to it. So if I can pay that person, if my
Hmm.
business is big enough to pay that person, I will be on Instagram probably, or I don't know, TikTok, or you know. But until then, I really think it's not important for me, and it's not the right, it's not the right use of my time. Yeah, to do that. Yeah.
It reflects, I think, your overall policy of doing things slowly and well
Yeah.
versus trying to do everything at once.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is really, really important. And what's also interesting for me is that um, you think that there's only one path, but this is actually
Hmm.
the beauty, right? There's so many possibilities, so many things that you can spend your time on. So you can either get FOMO, or you say, well, this is my path, right? This is how I go,
Hmm.
and this is what I feel that works for me. And for some people, they will be super great at Reddit, I'm never there. I tried, posting a few links, and I just felt it doesn't fulfill me to do it. I mean, probably
Hmm.
fulfillment, maybe people don't want to seek fulfillment in everything that they're doing. But for me, the trade-off on, how much time and also energy do I spend on this channel, and only because people say it's really important, and how much do I get from it, this didn't add up. So I'm currently not doing a
Hmm.
lot, or actually nothing, on Reddit, for example. And I actually think it's okay. You don't have to do everything. If you have like one thing that works for you, that's your way, and that can be really nice, I think.
Could say that the key is in the
Yeah.
choosing a path and not getting distracted by all the branching paths to infinity.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you launched the podcast, uh, how did you launch it?
Um, well, the podcast was actually before starting my business, and
So the
I
podcast came before consulting.
well, I did a little bit consulting before, but I didn't do it as a business, right? So in Austria,
Okay.
what you have to do is that if you are going over a specific number of revenue, you have actually to
Hmm.
register a company, right? And so when you're below that, you can just have like your full time job or part time job or whatever you have, right? And just do it on the side without being a business, a registered business. And so I did already consulting before, but not as a business, if that makes sense. I don't know, this is just how the law works
Hmm.
here in Austria. And so the podcast was in this phase actually where I didn't register a business, and I really waited very long because I don't know, I just didn't want to, I want to take it slow again. And I really wanted I waited until the last minute that now I have to register a business because I'm getting too much revenue here.
Mm.
um and so the
Great problem to
podcast,
have.
yeah, that's what I thought, right? So if you have that problem that you have to, then it makes sense to do it. And then I got
Right.
an accountant to do it because I didn't want to do it. I don't have the skills, and I didn't want to put my brain power into that. And I thought, well, if you have enough
Hmm.
revenue that you are forced to open a business, then you get an accountant. And they handled it for me, which was also very nice, from the way how I like to deal with things. Um,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I did the podcast, and I was thinking of what is interesting to me, and for me it was really, um, I wanted to get insights into different companies, right? I was working for Microsoft so long, and I didn't feel like I have a good idea of what others are doing, so it was very
Hmm.
self-driven again, which very often you hear this is very bad as a founder, right? If you're doing things because you want to do them. And I totally see where people are coming from, but this is how the podcast started, right? I was like, I want to know, how are people developing software in other
Hmm.
companies? What do you think about testing? Is this now cool or is it not cool? Because I have been, I think you're getting blind if you're in one company so for such a long time, right? And I knew, and Microsoft is not like a tiny company, so they have very very different um, practices throughout the organization, right? So one will do DDT and the
Hmm.
other will not do it, and so on. So I definitely saw it, a lot of different things. But it was everything was Microsoft, and it's not like you get a very diverse picture of how people are thinking about software creation. And so this was interesting to me, and yeah, and so this is how I decided to do the podcast. I was a little bit back and forth, and what should I do. Another topic that was really interesting was a little bit what you're doing, like, because I wanted to start my own business. I was thinking, should I interview founders and ask them,
Hmm.
about their recipes and get information like this. But then, because I wanted to align it more with my business goals, I thought, well, if I do this, right, it's interesting to me, but I don't have a lot of direct outcome for my business. Whereby, if I'm doing the
Hmm.
other one, in the worst case scenario, I'm learning something that's really interesting for me, but also helps me with my consulting, you know, and yeah. And so this is how I started the podcast.
And then, as far as like getting listeners at the beginning, did you already have a Twitter following at the point? Did you do like a product hunt launch, or
Um,
where did you go with it?
yeah, at the beginning, I didn't do any product hunt launch. I just talked about it on Indie Hackers, for example. I talked
Hmm.
about it on Twitter. I didn't have like a huge following at that point. Um, couple of hundred people. I think, I don't know, maybe it was around 1,000 people or something that were following on my Twitter. And I just did the podcast, and then I created a own handle for my podcast, and people seemed to like it, and they came. I tried to launch it on Product Hunt, but only like half a year later. And
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't worth my time, I would say, right? It was interesting because I've
Mm.
never launched something. And so it was definitely an activity. And this was also, with a lot of activities, I try to find several reasons why I'm doing something, right? And so if they are adding
Mm-hmm.
up, then it doesn't matter, like one goes the wrong way. I thought, well, Product Hunt is something that people are using, sometimes quite successfully, sometimes not. I knew that at that time. But you have to do it once to know what it actually is. So I thought, well, let's do it. And I don't know how many upvotes I got. A couple, like 100 or 200. I don't know. I forgot a little bit, but something like this. I think 100. But I didn't see like a spike in listenership, right? And so this is the important thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're thinking about your metrics, if I saw how many people looked at my website, you didn't really see a difference between the product hunt launch to a week when I launching a new episode, right? So for me,
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, I didn't really bring much. And yeah, but it was my, I mean, it's also not that I, prepared like weeks before and prepped people. It's also not really my way. If you are coming back to what
Mm-hmm.
my way is, right? I really hate asking people for favors and, can you upload it? And so I didn't want to
Right.
do that, and I didn't do it. And so, yeah, probably you saw it also in the results of, the product hunt launch.
Were
So yeah.
there were there any moments or strategies you pursued that did cause spikes in listenership?
Not so much. It's a very stable growth, I would say. So
Mm-hmm.
every week is sort of the same um, of growth. I mean, obviously there are like some weeks are better than others, but I don't think I have found anything that um, grows the podcast now substantially. And I think I haven't looked for it, to be honest, right? So the podcast, as I said, was something that I did because I was interested in doing it, and I had so many other interesting aspects and so much value that I get out of it, that growing it was an afterthought. um,
Mm-hmm.
and now that and actually when I started it, I wasn't sure if I would like it, right? It was an experiment of mine. And so when I found out that I actually really, really enjoy doing this podcast, more and more came the idea, maybe if I like it so much, maybe I should start growing it. And this is the state that I'm in right now. So I'm not really growing it. I'm doing really very little for the podcast. I'm announcing it on Twitter once a week or every
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks. I'm releasing every 2 weeks, right? I'm announcing it, and that's it, right? Uh, and there's definitely potential for growth, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
why I also recently I started looking for some sponsorship, because if I want to, now it's at the point that I say, well, the time that I spend on the podcast is this time that I can spend on it, where I feel like
Mm-hmm.
good with doing something where you don't get any get any monetary value out of it. But everything else, I think I would have to be able to justify it, because every hour that I take out, is an hour less with my kids, and the hour less that I also have to think like how I'm going to pay the rent and things like this, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
so this is why more and more it came to my mind, maybe something that I could turn into a business. And so I'm taking it also very slow. I'm now having actually a sponsor, and I actually have another one lined up, so that will sponsor the podcast again. So this is really nice, and I'm really happy
Nice.
about it, because it means that, yeah, I should start thinking a little bit more about how to grow it, and what would be, yeah, ways to grow it. I haven't thought about it much. It was natural growth right now.
The nice thing about revenue is it justifies investing even more into it.
Exactly, right? So I can actually take what I get as sponsorship and
Mm-hmm.
try out things. I've never I'm thinking about it. Maybe I should, promote it somewhere. I don't know where exactly. I have never done that before, right? But
Right.
if you have, and and I'm really seeing my things as very separate, right? So the money that the podcast makes itself, I really dedicate to the podcast, right? And so now the podcast has some experiment money where I will learn a lot, right? Maybe I'm running Facebook ads or Twitter ads, or I don't know. I have never done something like
Hmm.
this. Maybe it's a complete stupid idea and nobody will, listen to my podcast because of that. I could also use this money to have, a content marketing person that, does something for the
Hmm.
podcast and write some blog posts, or, does something on Twitter more than I do, right? Every 2 weeks, one tweet, right? Um, and so, yeah, I think it really opens up some possibilities. And I'm really excited about it because I really love doing the podcast, right? And so, me thinking about, well, if the podcast grows and brings in revenue, I can spend even more time doing that. And also, I think there could be different types of episodes that are bringing even more
Hmm.
value to the listeners and things like that. And all of that is very exciting to me. So, yeah, this is definitely also something very exciting. I'm really happy about it.
How did you find that first sponsor? Who reached out to who?
The sponsor reached out to me, and so what I did is I was announcing it on a show. So
Hmm.
it was in my podcast that I'm looking now for sponsors. I wrote a tweet about it on the Twitter of the podcast. I think I posted it once on Indie Hacker, but it just disappeared. I think without a lot
Hmm.
of upvotes or something. Um, and then I had it in my newsletter, and I think the people that
Hmm.
reached out, they found it out of because of my newsletter, because I'm running also a newsletter, and I have like, I don't know, 2,500 people or something on it right now. And so yeah, so they reached out and they told me they want to do it. And I actually had another person that asked for it. I don't know, I have to ask them where they heard about it, but I think they just listened to my podcast and wanted to advertise there. um, and now the next sponsor that wants to do a sponsorship with the podcast, I think I have to ask them where they. But they also reached out via Twitter DM and asked me if they can, sponsor the podcast. What I also did is, like, I had 3 companies in mind that I thought would be a really good fit. And
Hmm.
so I actually reached out to them, which I said I'm not really good at it, and it took me a lot of took me a lot of, getting my courage to do that. Um,
Hmm.
but that didn't go out very well. So yeah, from one, I didn't hear back at all. I don't know, maybe the
Mm.
email got into spam. I don't know, which I find, ghosted somehow. Which makes me feel really bad because it feels like I'm this silly person that people are ghosting, right? But I really felt like when I reached out, there were only 2 people that I reached out, and I really felt
Hmm.
that they would benefit a lot from the audience that I have, and that, I like the tool very much, and what they have to offer. So I thought it's really a good match. But yeah, one ghosted me, so I feel like this silly, shitty, silly person now. I don't know. And the other person, they came back, but they have never done podcast sponsoring before, and so I think
Hmm.
they either don't understand what podcast sponsoring is, or they didn't want to understand because they wanted to, instead of me sponsoring the podcast, also 10,000 other things that I'm doing for them. And I said, well, it's not really working that way. So yeah, actually the 2 that I reached out didn't work out. So again, yeah, showing, my potential for growth in this sales aspect. I didn't do a really good job there.
Well, I think the with only two reaching out, like sales, you have to do so much volume, right? Like it's got to be targeted. You have to find the right people, but you also
Yeah,
have to talk
probably.
to a lot
Yeah.
of them because you got to contact someone at the right time where they're in the mood to
Yeah.
buy and all of that.
Yeah, so I have actually
I
2
wouldn't get too
strategies.
dissuaded.
One strategy, well, one is this mastermind, right? But actually, my
Hmm.
real strategy is to be so good in the things that I'm good at that I can pay a person
Hmm.
that, is good at
Yeah.
sales. I think that's the win-win situation. So that's actually I mean, obviously, you have to get decent in a lot of things. I think until you don't have to anymore. And so
Hmm.
until now, I just push the sales away, and somehow I'm doing without it. And then maybe I will never, grow as a salesperson, and just grow as, the other strengths that I have, and just get a really good person that loves to do it, and, that are passionate, and, have results. I think that would be
Well,
the
that
optimal
is one
for
of the
me.
nice things about having a growing podcast, right? A growing audience is every day you're talking to more people who
Hmm.
are also your potential sponsors. So maybe you never actually have to learn sales as long as
Yeah,
you
yeah,
keep
that would be
making really
good,
good
right?
podcasts.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That would be really cool. Yeah.
Do the things you're good at, right?
Yeah,
Like double down
yeah,
on the channels that are working. You already have people coming in and asking to give you money,
exactly.
so
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
in a good position.
yeah.
What's the current like grand vision for the podcast and the consulting? Where do you want your time to go? Like, what is the business that you're trying to build at this point?
Well, the podcast is, I would really like the podcast to be a much more important part of my business, right?
Hmm.
So if I could do more episodes and, provide more value, and really know, people, so what I would also really like is like have more interaction.
Hmm.
So what I maybe have transformed the podcast into something where people can also, voice their concerns a little bit more, or their voice, right, and say something and tell me. And yeah, for that I really have to make it into something where I can justify for myself to spend time. So I think I have to first, get this stable revenue thing going for the podcast, which I think right now I see it goes in the right direction, because I think, because you asked me, right? I think that
Hmm.
because this person heard, my first sponsor, they thought, well, I
Hmm.
can do that, right? So when I was just saying it, for example, on the indie hackers, I was telling people, well, actually my podcast is good for indie hackers because I'm an indie hacker. People are already following my journey a little bit there, right? I'm
Hmm.
really comfortable, promoting things like this. And so if you're building tools, I mean, obviously for my audience, right, that would be a really cool thing. And so the first sponsor is actually an indie business. And so I think because they heard that, and so they make this connection in a real world example while somebody else is doing this, right? They get much more this feeling that they want to do it as well. But yeah, so having this a little bit more stable, where I think, well, this would be good for me, because as I said, I would like to know at least, there's like a basis coming in each month, and would just make me a little bit more calm, because I'm always like, I'm the person that maybe nobody is coming tomorrow anymore, right? No, I will never have a workshop anymore, right? So this would be really good for my mindset. And then for my consultancy business, I really want to build this tool, or grow this tool, and make it much more a bigger impact for my consultancy business, because I think it's something that provides a lot of value. People will, there's like this combination of, all the experiences that I had, and the data analysis skills that I have, and then having this tool, I think is a very, very powerful combination, that will bring some clients. And if I can turn it into a self-service tool that then, again, yeah, works towards my need of
Hmm.
having like this stable, calculated, income, I think that would be really cool. Yeah.
Any advice for the up and coming indie hacker, somebody new?
Well, for me, I think the most tricky part was the mindset at the beginning. So I was very much like, oh, I know I'm really good at, what I'm doing at Microsoft. I'm really good employee, more or less, right? So I'm
Hmm.
really good data scientist. I'm a good, innovator. I can work with engineering teams, but I wasn't a founder. And this was really crippling in. And I felt like, oh, I have no idea about sales. I have no idea about accounting. I was so afraid of opening this company, right? So
Hmm.
just because I felt really overwhelmed with all of these things. And at that point, I was like, oh, before I start my company, I will first do an MBA, right? So those things were coming in. I just needed some safety net, or somebody that tells me, oh, you will be fine, right? Because I don't
Hmm.
have like, at that point I didn't have like any network or people that could, give me this confidence, or where I, would need some back on the bat, and they would say, yeah, you will do fine, right? um, And so again, actually, what helped me a lot was just taking time off. So I know at that point that I was so scared. I was still at Microsoft and I was so scared, and I was like, I really want to do it, but I feel like I have no competencies, business competencies whatsoever. I'm an extreme technical person, but I don't know how to how to start a business. I took my time off and I really tried to just work every day on my self-esteem and my belief in myself, that I'm not only an employee, right, but I'm a business
Hmm.
person now. And a business person can look very different than all the others. I was never that serious person, right? Like I'm going around, as I said, go big or go home, or I'm doing this now and I'm having this company, and I didn't feel so serious. I never feel very serious, to be honest. And so I
Hmm.
felt like as a the perception that I had, like a business person should look like, was very much not what I was. And so I took a whole
Hmm.
month just um, to tell myself that I'm a business person. This is how a business person could look like, right? And it's my business,
Hmm.
and I can do it. And and obviously, then if people are at one point then coming, this is really nice, right? But I waited for it. It's I had a lot of and I'm getting a lot of really shitty, sorry, maybe that's not a word I should say here, but proposals how I should work, right? And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, you really really undervalue my time and my personality and my experience, and that can really get to you. And you feel like, oh my god, if somebody wants to pay you, I don't know, nothing for 2 weeks of work, that can, especially if you're in this very vulnerable time where you think, well, am I even a business person, right? This can really get to you. And I was very strict with, I said no thank you, that's not how I work. And moved on and worked on my self-esteem and my ability to believe in myself, that I'm a business person and that this is how I do my business. Yeah.
I think the mindset is so important when we're creating something out of nothing. It's at the beginning, at least, it's entirely your mindset, and I
Yeah,
think that it's important to be in the right one and figure out what the right mindset is for you.
exactly. And not to be influenced by all the shoulds, or this is how you do it, right? Because you will
Hmm.
write this blog post and nobody will read it, and you write this tweet and nobody will like it, and you will build this product and nobody will come. And this can very much happen. And obviously there are always really lucky people that don't have this path, but the majority has
Hmm.
this path. And I think then the most dangerous thing is to do what everybody else is doing, but step one step back and think, well, is it even important, right? So what I really like, and it's I'm talking a lot about Twitter because this is one of the platforms that I chose, that I feel most comfortable. I actually really enjoy Twitter until the point that it takes over my life, and then I have to really
Mm.
distance myself from it. But I read somewhere, and it said, well, likes don't pay the bills. And I think this is so
Mm.
true, right? So people are, it's so easy to be motivated by those signals that are created to make you addicted to something, but that are not reflective of your business, or of your personality, or there. I mean, I'm if I'm on Twitter, I see so many brilliant tweets that have no likes, just because the algorithm doesn't push them, or because they don't have an
Mm.
audience right now. And on the other hand, I see tweets that are so low quality with hundreds, thousands of likes. And so I think it's really important. This stepping back, I think, is so important, and thinking and reflecting what you think is important for yourself, for your life, and for your business. Yeah.
It's a good comment on outcomes in general. Like, you're not necessarily in control of the outcome. Only in control of your process and the things that you do, but you can't necessarily control how the world will respond to the things that you
Hmm.
do. Maybe that shouldn't be how you measure your self-esteem.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 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 Very true.
Well, Michaela, thank you so much for coming here. You can find Michaela at mgreiler on Twitter, or you should definitely be checking out the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast at software-engineering-unlocked.com. Yeah, any parting words for us?
No, I think that's it. I think it's important to follow your dream, whatever that is. And really, so what I did at the beginning as well is I was thinking about what success means to me, and I think I have a very personal definition of that. I'm an extremely ambitious person, but I'm also extremely protective of the time that I have with my kids, for example, and in general how I spend my time. And so success for me means that if, for example, if I made more money this year than I
Mm-hmm.
did working at Microsoft, and even building my own business, right? So this is like the foundation, so it will get better over time. And spending more time with my kids than I would have, this is really success for me. And this can look completely different for you. And I think knowing that is so important for all the things that I said, for this stepping back and reflecting, because only if you know your definition of success, you can see if you're on the right track or not, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a
And
pleasure.
I'll see you. I'll see you around at Indie Worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.